When Prince Harry agreed to sit down with Piers Morgan, no one expected calm conversation, least of all Piers himself. The tension between the outspoken host and the defiant prince had been brewing for years, and now, face to face under the studio lights, the air was thick with unspoken resentment. What was supposed to be an interview quickly turned into a battle of words, one that would leave both men's reputations bruised and millions stunned by how it all ended. The studio of Piers Morgan Uncensored was uncharacteristically quiet that evening. The usual audience chatter had been replaced by a charged stillness. The air felt like it was waiting for something combustible. Piers Morgan sat in his chair, posture sharp, expression calm but ready. Across from him sat Prince Harry, dressed in a dark navy suit, no tie, collar slightly undone, his signature scruff shadowing a face that looked tired but defiant. He didn't smile. He didn't even nod. He just stared across the table, one hand folded over the other, waiting. Piers leaned slightly forward, his trademark tone balanced somewhere between polite and piercing. "Your Royal Highness," he began, "thank you for joining us. It's been quite some time since you've sat down for an interview that wasn't, shall we say, curated." Harry smirked. "Well, Piers, unlike you, I don't need to scream for relevance. I'm here because people want to hear truth, not tabloid tantrums." A murmur rippled through the crew behind the cameras. Piers, to his credit, didn't flinch. He smiled thinly. "I see we're starting early tonight," he said lightly. "Let's talk about that truth then. You've often said the media destroyed your peace, but you've also built a career speaking to them. How do you reconcile that?" Harry adjusted in his chair, the arrogance almost tangible. "Maybe I realized," he said, his voice slow and deliberate, "that if I don't tell my story, people like you will tell it for me, and twist it." Piers nodded slowly, pen tapping against his notes. "Right. But isn't that convenient? You claim to hate attention, yet you've given more interviews in the last 3 years than your entire family combined." Harry laughed dryly, tilting his head. "I wouldn't expect you to understand balance, Piers. There's a difference between controlling your narrative and feeding the noise. You live off noise, I live off truth." The temperature in the room seemed to rise. Piers leaned back, folding his arms, eyes narrowing just slightly. "Truth," he repeated. Interesting word coming from someone who's been accused of rewriting history. And his own book. Harry's lips tightened. "I'm not rewriting anything," he said sharply. "I'm correcting what people like you distorted. You call it rewriting. I call it reclaiming." The exchange was sharp, fast, every word landing with a sting. The control that usually defined Piers's interviews was slipping into a careful tension. He tried to keep the tone civil, but Harry's posture, his smug pauses, his faint smirk with every counterattack, it was grating. Piers turned a page on his notes. "Let's talk about family," he said. "You've said publicly that you want reconciliation, but your actions, the interviews, the memoir, the Netflix deal, seem to burn bridges faster than they can be rebuilt. Do you think you've done anything to repair the damage?" Harry raised an eyebrow. "Repair?" he echoed. "I'm not the one who broke it. But sure, let's pretend it's all my fault. That's what your viewers want to hear, right? The poor prince who ran away, ungrateful for his palace." Piers' tone dropped an octave. "I think my viewers, and most people, just want honesty. You talk about healing, but everything you've done seems to cause more division. Even tonight, you've walked in here with the same arrogance that people accuse you of." Harry smirked again, this time almost tauntingly. "I don't need to be liked, Piers, and I don't need to explain myself to people who've made a living off criticizing me." For a brief moment, the silence between them said more than words could. Piers looked at him steadily, and Harry looked back, unmoved, even amused. It wasn't an interview anymore. It was a duel. Finally, Piers said quietly, "You do realize, don't you, that this behavior, the sarcasm, the deflection, is exactly what turns people against you?" Harry shrugged. "I'm not here to make friends," he said coolly. "I'm here to tell the truth, my truth. If people can't handle that, that's their issue, not mine." Piers exhaled, shaking his head slightly, more in disbelief than anger. The polite beginning was gone. The real conversation was just beginning. He straightened his papers, looked up, and said evenly, "Then let's get into your truth, shall we?" The next question would cut deeper, and this time, even Harry's composure might not hold. The studio clock blinked its indifferent digits while the room seemed to lean in, listening. Piers glanced down at his notes, then set the papers aside as if to say he wouldn't need a script for what came next. "Let's talk specifics," he said, voice measured. "You've said repeatedly the press hunted you and your wife. You've suggested the institutions around you failed to protect you. Yet you pursued multi-million-dollar media deals, a podcast, a docuseries, a tell-all memoir. Help me understand the contradiction." Harry's mouth twitched into the hint of a smile that wasn't a smile. "It's only a contradiction if you don't grasp the difference between exploitation and authorship. I'm not auditioning for your approval. I'm correcting a hostile record." "Is that what happened in your book?" Piers asked, evenly. "Correction or catharsis? Because to many readers it felt less like setting the record straight and more like setting family members on fire." Harry leaned back, lacing his fingers over his lap. "And there it is. You want contrition for the crime of telling the truth. Sorry, not happening." Piers didn't blink. "No one asked for contrition. I'm asking for clarity. You say you want reconciliation, but nearly every public move makes reconciliation harder. Why sign up for another televised sit-down if peace is the goal?" "Because peace," Harry said crisply, "doesn't come from pretending the bruises aren't there." "And yet," Piers replied, "most people don't heal a family fracture by performing it for cameras." The crew behind the lenses held still, as if movement might shatter the thin glass pane of the moment. Harry tilted his head. "You're not exactly a marriage counselor, are you, Piers?" "No," Piers said, mild as a winter sun. "I'm a broadcaster who asks obvious questions you refuse to answer." Harry chuckled, low and humorless. "Obvious to you isn't the same as intelligent." "Let's try intelligent then," Piers said, leaning in a fraction. "You've argued that parts of the British press are racist and cruel. Many viewers will accept there's cruelty. We've all seen it. But when you paint with a roller instead of a brush, you implicate millions who read or work in media responsibly. Is every critic a bigot, or do you simply dislike criticism?" Harry's stare cooled. "When you've lived what I've lived, you learn which patterns matter. I don't need to pass your exam." "It isn't an exam," Piers said softly. "It's accountability." Silence pulsed. A light hissed faintly overhead. Harry shifted forward, elbows to knees. "Accountability? You? The man who's made a career calling other people hypocrites for ratings? That's rich." Piers let the insult pass. He folded his hands, anchoring himself to the desk. "You've brought up safety, privacy, and dignity. All legitimate concerns. But you also launched a public campaign about your private grievances, then bristled when people responded. Are you seeking privacy or primetime?" "I'm seeking fairness," Harry shot back. "You keep acting as if telling my story forfeits my humanity. It doesn't. I'm not a prop for your nostalgia about a family that eats its wounds with silver cutlery." Piers' brow lifted. "And yet you sell chapters of those wounds by the page." Harry's smile hardened. "Better I sell them than let you steal them." A beat. Piers changed angle. "Let's discuss your public statements about service," he said. "You've claimed you still serve the public, just in a different way, but you've also monetized nearly every inch of your narrative. Where does service end and brand begin?" "Service," Harry said, "is not defined by a building in Westminster or a crest on stationery. It's defined by impact." "Then show us," Piers replied. "Not the sizzle reel, substance. What measurable outcomes are you proudest of? Beyond awareness and applause?" Harry blinked, irritation rippling. "I don't need to present a spreadsheet for you." "You're the one telling the world you're mission-driven," Piers said, voice still calm. "A mission is measurable. Otherwise, it's marketing." Harry stared at him, like a man deciding whether the cliff is too high to jump. "You want numbers? Programs funded, veterans treated, scholarships endowed? They exist, even if your show refuses to see them." "My team requested documentation from your foundation this week," Piers said, tapping a folder he never opened. "We received a one-pager of talking points and no audited figures." Harry's jaw flexed. "So, now you're an accountant." "I'm a journalist asking for receipts," Piers said. You invited the scrutiny when you made impact your centerpiece. For the first time, Harry's voice thinned. You think you can bury me in paperwork to avoid the real conversation. I think paperwork is the real conversation when money and moral authority are involved, Piers replied. Harry exhaled slowly, a contained fuse. He straightened, smoothed an invisible wrinkle from his jacket. What's your next trick, Piers? Drag my wife into it? You lot always do when you're losing the plot. Piers kept his gaze level. I'm not dragging anyone, but you've made Meghan central to your public story. It's fair to ask how the partnership influences your decisions. Harry's laugh was bright and cold. Ah, there she is, the specter you can't resist. Say her name, spike your ratings. You should be paying us royalties. I'm not speaking about her to provoke, Piers said. I'm speaking about her because you do, constantly. You narrate mutual choices as singular righteousness, then bridle when questioned about the team behind them. Team, Harry repeated sharply. You mean marriage, partnership, something you apparently can't comprehend unless it's on a production schedule. Marriage, Piers agreed, is exactly why the public assesses both of you when you ask them to adopt your narrative wholesale. Harry's eyes flashed. We didn't ask to be adopted by anyone. We asked to be left alone. Piers gave a small, incredulous smile. On a global interview watched by tens of millions, you keep saying, leave us alone, into the loudest microphone you can find. Harry's patience snapped a thread. What do you want, Piers? A confession? A capitulation? Do you need me to kneel to the altar of your audience and beg forgiveness for not playing mascot anymore? I want an honest answer to a simple question, Piers said, voice firming. Why should people believe you're fighting for principle when your every move is packaged for profit? Harry sat back, considering, the quiet stretching. When he spoke again, his tone was a soft blade. People should believe me because I've paid for the truth in blood and sleep and family. Because I walked away from an inheritance to become a person. You call that branding. I call it breathing. Piers let the words hang. And yet, he said gently, you didn't walk away from the spotlight that came with the inheritance. You carried it with you and tried to rent it out. Harry's lips parted. He closed them again. The cameras fed the tension a steady diet. I think we're done with your circular sermons, Harry said finally. Ask a real question, or admit you're performing resentment for clicks. Piers' expression cooled a shade. He lowered his voice, the way you do when you're choosing exactness over volume. Fine, a real question. Do you regret anything? Any choice? Any word? Any grievance aired? Anything you would take back for the sake of the people you still claim to love? Harry folded his arms, chin up, eyes bright with disdain. I regret underestimating just how fragile the British media ego is. Beyond that, no. Not one sentence, Piers pressed. Not one private detail that didn't need to be public? Not one that wasn't already being sold, Harry replied. I simply stopped letting other people invoice my life. Piers nodded once, almost to himself. That will be heard as brave by some and breathtakingly self-serving by others. Harry's mouth curved. Lucky for me, others don't get a vote. And yet they are the public whose respect you say you want. I never said I wanted their respect, Harry said. I said I wanted fairness. Respect is optional. Fairness isn't. Piers leaned back, the chair giving the quietest sigh. You've asked for fairness while dispensing very little of it tonight. To your family, to the audience, even to me. You've come armed with contempt and called it candor. Harry's eyes cooled to flint. And you came armed with old grudges and called it journalism. A red tally light flicked on and off as a camera adjusted. Someone coughed. The room felt like a lit match held above dry leaves. Piers gathered his notes again, aligning the pages into a neat stack he didn't need. All right, he said, let's take a brief break. Harry snorted. Need a moment to regroup? No, Piers answered, tone steady and unhurried. I'd like to use the next segment to ask you about veterans' issues, security, and the charities you've referenced. I'll give you every chance to be precise. Harry's stare didn't soften. Precision is wasted on people who prefer outrage. Then surprise us, Piers said. Choose precision. The floor manager counted down with fingers. The lights cooled a fraction. Music swelled and faded. As they drifted to commercial, Harry leaned forward, just enough for Piers to hear. "You think you can pin me to your storyboard?" he murmured. "You can't." Piers didn't look away. "I don't need to pin you," he said quietly. "I just need you to keep telling us who you are." The break ended. The red light returned. The interview resumed. And with it, a new set of questions sharp enough to slice paper. What they would cut next wouldn't be paper. The third segment opened with a close-up on Harry's face, the studio lights catching the faint sheen of irritation that had replaced his earlier confidence. Piers Morgan sat upright, his posture calm, but his eyes sharper now. Less interviewer, more surgeon, preparing for a difficult incision. The air between them felt charged, like static before a storm. "Welcome back," Piers said smoothly, voice controlled, the consummate broadcaster once more. "We've covered your experiences with the media, your views on privacy, and your ongoing public role. I'd like to shift now to accountability." Harry arched an eyebrow. "Oh, here we go," he muttered with a small, mocking smile. Piers ignored the jab. "You've spoken about wanting to inspire change," he continued, "but when critics point out contradictions in your actions, like demanding privacy while signing multi-million-dollar content deals, you call them hateful. Is it possible that some criticism is simply warranted?" Harry leaned back, crossing his legs. "Piers, you seem obsessed with this privacy argument. Maybe that's because your profession depends on violating it. You've built a career on gossip, not journalism." Piers' expression didn't change, though a faint muscle twitched in his jaw. "I ask questions for a living, Your Royal Highness. That's not gossip, that's accountability. And I think viewers would agree that the man who's written an autobiography detailing every family argument isn't exactly allergic to publicity." Harry chuckled under his breath. "Autobiography, yes, not propaganda. I told the truth, something you might try sometime." For a moment, Piers simply studied him, not angry, but clearly deciding how far to let this play out. "Let's talk about responsibility then," he said finally. "You've criticized your father, your brother, the institution itself, but not once have I heard you say you regret anything. Do you ever think about the human cost of what you've said?" Harry sighed, looking amused. "Human cost? Piers, please. You talk as if telling the truth is violence. I didn't cause damage. I revealed it." "And yet," Piers said quietly, "you've hurt people you claim to love. That's not revelation. That's collateral." Harry laughed, loud and humorless. "You're very dramatic, aren't you? I suppose that's why your show exists. You need conflict to feel relevant." "Conflict?" Piers asked, still calm. "You've brought plenty of that yourself tonight, and all I've done is ask you to explain your own words." "I don't need to explain anything," Harry snapped. "Not to you, not to anyone. You wouldn't understand the kind of pressure that comes with being me." Piers leaned forward slightly. "Pressure? You mean the kind that comes with privilege, security, and a platform most people could never dream of? Forgive me, but I think there are millions who handle pressure with far less complaining." Harry's eyes flashed. "Oh, so now it's a competition of suffering? You're really showing your colors, Piers. This is what happens when people can't stand to see someone step out of their gilded cage." Piers spoke slowly, each word deliberate. Stepping out is one thing. Setting the cage on fire and blaming the people who built it, that's another. Harry's smirk faltered, if only slightly. The tension thickened. Piers continued. "Do you ever wonder, Harry, whether you've become the very thing you claim to despise? You say you hate the media circus, but you feed it every time you sit down like this. Every time you sell another version of the same story." Harry leaned forward, eyes sharp, tone mocking. "You think you're clever, don't you? You keep trying to catch me in some logical trap, but it doesn't work, Piers. I'm not the villain here. I'm the one who finally stopped pretending everything was fine." Piers' voice stayed calm, but firmer now. "And yet, everything about your tone tonight says you enjoy pretending you're above the rest of us. Every question I've asked, you've dodged or deflected with arrogance. You call yourself a truth teller, but you can't handle a question without turning it into an insult." Harry scoffed. "I can handle questions just fine. I just don't respect yours." That landed like a slap in the quiet studio. Piers blinked once, a small, almost imperceptible break in composure. Then he smiled. "All right," he said. Let's make it simple. You've said repeatedly that the monarchy is outdated and oppressive, but you still use your royal title. You still profit from it, and you still insist on the privileges it grants you. Isn't that hypocrisy? Harry's smile vanished. His voice dropped to a low growl. I'm not responsible for what the media or the monarchy label me as. If people use my title, that's their choice. I've moved on. Moved on? Piers asked, raising an eyebrow. You're here talking about it, aren't you? Harry's face hardened. You just don't get it, do you? I'm not here because of my title. I'm here despite it. You think it defines me, but it doesn't. That's your obsession, not mine. And yet, Piers said, leaning in just slightly, you've made an entire brand out of escaping it. You've monetized your rebellion. That's not liberation. That's marketing. Harry slammed a hand lightly on the arm of his chair. You don't know what you're talking about, he snapped. You've never had to live under that kind of scrutiny. Every moment dissected, every headline weaponized. You sit here pretending to understand, but you don't. You never could. Piers didn't flinch. You're right. I can't understand that kind of privilege, but I do understand responsibility. You've spent the last 3 years blaming everyone else. Your family, the press, the institution, and never once yourself. That's not courage, Harry. That's cowardice wrapped in self-pity. Harry shot up a little straighter in his chair, voice cold. You think you can talk to me like that because I'm sitting in your studio? You think you have the right to lecture me about courage? Piers didn't blink. No, I think I have the right to hold you to the same standard of accountability as anyone else who chooses to live in the spotlight. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. The red recording light blinked in the corner of the room like a heartbeat. Harry leaned forward, his tone venomous now. You know what, Piers? You're just another man hiding behind a desk because you're too afraid to live a real life. You talk about accountability, but your entire career is built on mocking people braver than you'll ever be. Piers sat completely still. When he spoke, his voice was calm, steady, but cold. And your career, Harry, seems built on burning bridges and calling it honesty. Harry opened his mouth to fire back, but for the first time, there was hesitation. He'd gone too far, and some part of him knew it. Piers glanced at the producer behind the glass, then looked back at Harry. We'll take another short break, he said. When we return, we'll talk about integrity, assuming there's any left in the room. Harry stared at him, jaw tight, face flushed. You really think you can intimidate me? Piers simply smiled. No, Your Highness, I think you're doing that all on your own. The lights dimmed slightly for the commercial cut, but the tension in the room didn't move an inch. The next segment would decide everything, and by the end of it, one of them wouldn't be staying in that chair. When the red light blinked back to life, the illusion of civility was already gone. The silence before Piers spoke wasn't calm. It was charged, like the air before thunder splits the sky. Piers adjusted the cuff of his shirt, then looked directly at Prince Harry. His tone was cool, deliberate, the kind of politeness that carries the edge of a blade. Welcome back, he said. We're continuing our conversation with Prince Harry, a man who's redefined what it means to live publicly while demanding privacy. Let's see if we can find some common ground before the evening's over. Harry didn't smile. His jaw was tight, his eyes sharp, his expression the perfect cocktail of irritation and superiority. I'm not sure we're capable of finding common ground, Piers, he said flatly. You live in a world that feeds on controversy. I live in one that survives it. Piers gave a faint, humorless laugh. Well, you certainly know how to create it. Harry leaned forward, voice rising just enough for the microphone to catch the tension. You invited me here to talk, not to be insulted. I've insulted no one, Piers replied, unbothered. I've asked questions you've refused to answer. Harry smirked. Questions built on bias. You came into this wanting a fight. I just didn't realize how desperate you were to get one. Desperate? Piers repeated quietly. No, tired perhaps, of watching a man who's been given every privilege in the world spend every interview pretending to be its victim. The words hit like a hammer. Harry froze, his nostrils flaring, and for a second, it looked as if he might laugh it off again. But he didn't. Instead, his voice turned sharp, cutting. You know absolutely nothing about my life. You sit behind that desk, spewing venom about people you'll never understand. I had to rebuild everything, from scratch. You wouldn't last a week in my shoes. And yet, Piers said calmly, you seem to spend every day talking about them. Maybe stop polishing the shoes and start walking forward. Harry slammed a hand against the arm of his chair, his patience finally evaporating. You think you can talk to me like that because you're hiding behind a camera? You're a coward, Piers. You've made a career tearing people down, and you can't stand it when someone stands up to you. The crew in the studio went completely still. One producer behind the glass mouthed cut it, but Piers raised a finger. No, let it play out. Piers' voice, when he spoke again, was quiet but cutting. I don't tear people down, Harry. I hold them accountable. There's a difference, and the only reason you think you're being stood up to is because you've spent years surrounded by yes men. Harry's mouth twisted. Accountable? To whom? You? The same man who mocked my wife, my family, and my choices on national television? Please. You wouldn't recognize accountability if it sat next to you in the mirror. Careful, Piers said softly, the warning clear. Or what? Harry shot back. You'll lecture me about respect? Spare me the moral lesson, Piers. I'm not one of your tabloid puppets. I don't need your approval. No, Piers said evenly, but you clearly need an audience. That did it. Harry's chair scraped the floor as he sat forward, voice rising. You invited me here to humiliate me? That's all this was. Another cheap stunt for views. Piers leaned back, unshaken. You came here to play the victim. I just gave you a stage big enough. To prove it. Harry blinked, his face hardening into something between anger and disbelief. You're unbelievable, he hissed. You twist everything. Every time someone tries to tell the truth, people like you... People like me? Piers interrupted, his tone suddenly firmer, sharper. You mean journalists who don't let you script the narrative? People who won't let you weaponize trauma for sympathy? You're disgusting, Harry snapped. You think empathy is weakness because you've never had any. And you think arrogance is strength because it hides how lost you really are. Piers fired back. For the first time all evening, Harry fell silent. His lips parted, but no words came. The fury in his eyes wasn't just anger, it was wounded pride. Piers exhaled slowly, straightening the stack of papers in front of him, though everyone knew the interview was no longer about notes. You know, I thought maybe there was something left here, Piers said. A glimpse of humility, a shred of accountability, something that could remind people why they once respected you. But all you've shown tonight is contempt, for your family, for the public, for anyone who dares question you. Harry stood up abruptly, tugging at his microphone cable. I don't have to sit here and listen to this nonsense. You're right, Piers said, his voice steady. You don't. Harry froze mid-motion, narrowing his eyes. What's that supposed to mean? It means, Piers said, turning slightly toward the cameras, that this interview is over, because I don't reward arrogance with airtime. If you can't handle a civil conversation without turning it into a tantrum, then you don't belong on this show. There was a collective gasp from the crew. Even the camera operator hesitated. Harry's mouth fell open. Are you kicking me off your show? Yes, Piers said simply. Respect is a two-way street and you've blocked every lane. Harry looked furious, his face flushed, his hands clenched into fists. You'll regret this, Piers. You always regret going against me. Piers smiled faintly. I doubt it, but I think the world's seen enough for one evening, don't you? Harry stared at him, trembling with indignation, before finally ripping off his microphone. Unbelievable, he muttered. You invite me here just to insult me, and then you pretend you're the victim. I'm not pretending anything, Piers said calmly, standing now too. I'm doing my job. You just didn't like that someone wasn't afraid of you. Harry glared, breathing heavily. You're just another sad man clinging to relevance by attacking people more important than you. And you, Piers replied, his tone icy, are just another man mistaking fame for virtue. That was the final blow. Harry turned sharply, muttered something under his breath that was mercifully inaudible, and stormed off camera. The sound of the studio door slamming echoed through the silence. Piers remained where he was, collected, breathing evenly. He turned back toward the lens, the consummate professional reclaiming his composure. Well, he said softly, his trademark sardonic smile creeping back in. I think that's a good place to stop. I'd like to thank Prince Harry for his time, what little of it we had, and I'd like to thank our viewers for joining us tonight. We'll be right back after the break. The light on the camera turned off. The tension, however, didn't. The crew sat frozen, unsure whether to speak. Piers finally exhaled and muttered, "Well, that was bound to happen. What do you think? Was Piers too harsh, or did Harry's attitude go too far? Let us know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, because next week we'll dive into another unbelievable talk show moment that left the world speechless.